Hello, everybody, and welcome back again to day 6 of our Bible study with the book of Matthew. We are still in chapter 5, and we're going to see how far we can go. Yesterday's video was very long. I think what I'm going to try and do is have more emphasis placed on the amount of time that each study takes and less focus on how many parts I might take to do one chapter, because some chapters are just jam-packed. So let's get right into it. We're leaving off at verse 21. A lot of you probably heard this before. So Jesus is introducing this idea where he's going beyond simply what the law said. So the law says, "You have heard that it was said to those of old, 'You shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment.' But Jesus says, to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says, 'You fool,' will be liable to the hell of fire." Those are incredibly serious words, with how easily people of the world and Christians insult each other like it's nothing. When Jesus here says, somebody says, "You fool," you'll be liable to the hell of fire. Puts it into perspective. I like that there's this call that Jesus gives us and the people here to go beyond just what the law said. And I think that highlights one of the big limiting factors, the big issues with the scribes and Pharisees. They followed the law very well, better than you or me probably ever would be able to. They followed the law to a T, but they didn't always have the underlying spirit of each law that they followed. For example, they may not murder their brother, but they might have enraged hatred and anger towards their brother. They're missing the point. Yes, they're not doing the physical sin that the law said don't do, but they're missing the point. They don't have the spirit behind it. And like we talked about in other parts of this study, like the motive that guides your actions is just as important and likely more important than the actions themselves. So, yeah, I think that's a really good critique to the scribes and Pharisees and to any of us today who are guilty of that same type of thought. And it goes on to talk about, so if you're offering your gift at the altar and you remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there at the altar and go be reconciled to your brother first and then come give your gift. So I wonder if that even applies to us in terms of prayer. Probably not, because we might be praying for the help of the relationship with our brother. But just even simply in our terms of the emphasis placed on trying to reconcile with your brother, with whatever person you have aught against or has aught against you, go repent. Go try and reconcile it with him. Usually arguments are two-way streets where both of you did something wrong. Talk it out and accept responsibility for what you did wrong, and see if you can't have an amicable solution and end your conversation in love and reconciliation with your brother who is currently frustrated and angry with you. And it's so important. And so Jesus also says, come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going with him to court, while you're on the way, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge and the judge to the guard and you be put in prison. Truly I say to you, Jesus, I say to you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. You will pay, you and me both, everybody in this world, we will all pay for the guilt that we have due to the sins that we have committed. We will pay righteously for the sins that we have committed. If we're not covered by the blood of Christ, and if we're not having that genuine relationship with God and forgiven and saved. But yeah, so Jesus comes in there and says, come to terms quickly with your accuser. Don't be this pompous, awful human being that has so much pride that you can't abase yourself enough to admit that you have wrong and that you want to go apologize for the wrong that you have to other people. I don't know about you. I think it's pretty intensely prevalent in the world, and it certainly is in my area, where people have difficulty, especially, well, I don't know. People especially have difficulty with admitting that they're wrong. There's so much pride in our world, I feel like. And I feel like the world would be a much better place if we were all a little less proud, a little more humble, a little more loving, maybe a lot more loving, and a lot more understanding. And as well as, even just like to quote the letter of John, being swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath. If everybody had those qualities, man, life would go so much more smoothly. We'd have so much less awful people and so much more good relationships. Especially if people were honest too. Having honesty with tactfulness, that it would be so much better. And now we get to the big part, and it's on lust. You have heard that it was said, "You shall not commit adultery," but I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. How many of us are guilty of that? Those of us who are married, married men probably especially, and married women too, but how much of us are guilty of looking at others with lustful intent? I think probably every single one of us. And if not, it might be due to some sort of a asexual nature that you have in your own self. It would be more due to that than it would be that you're some great person. It's just that you have a biological defect, probably. That sounds insulting, but a biological difference, let's put it that way, to the majority of people that allows you to avoid that for the most part, if not all the way. But for the vast majority of us, we're guilty of this. We struggle with lust. And so, like, to put it in perspective, I feel like I can see people trying to weasel their way out of being guilty of this sin if you look at a woman with lustful intent. So if you double take at somebody, I think that counts, right? You see somebody that they're attractive, you want to look away because you want to remain faithful to your spouse, and then you can't really help yourself and you look back a little bit, you're already guilty. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out. Tear it out and throw it away, for it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away, for it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body goes to hell. And I think this is honestly true. I think it's true and literal. I think that for most of us, the price of removing your hand or your eye so that you don't have your whole body and whole self go to hell is pretty steep, especially with the consideration that we can... I can't remember if it was malfunctioning, but hopefully I fixed it now. I think I was on basically that these two examples given, I think, could actually be taken literally. But for most of us, the idea of doing that and giving that up, our hand up or our eyeball up, is so high a price in our natural minds that we would rather seek not to, or find some other way, or rely on the grace of God and the forgiveness of God through the blood of Christ for our sins in this way. But I don't think you just have to interpret it literally. I think it's both literal and figurative, or metaphorical even. So, like, if you have something in your life that is causing you to sin, then cut it off, because it's better for you to lose that than it is for you to lose your whole self to the sin. If you have a TV show that fills you with lustful thoughts and it's causing you to sin, if it's a TV show that has some really raunchy nude scenes in it or something that leads you towards pornography and you end up sinning against your wife or sinning against your husband, then give that up. And that kind of segues into what I'm trying to lead towards is, yeah, that's the figurative, metaphorical view for it, but also there's the aspect of, the Bible is really clear on how we're supposed to deal with sexual sin in specific. And it's not bow up and fight against it. It's not strengthen yourself so that you can fight sexual temptation. It's over and over and over again, run away. it is different from other sins in that way. The advice for it is run the flip away from the sexual temptation. And an example is, I believe it was Joshua with Potiphar's wife trying to seduce him. I believe it's the Pharaoh's wife trying to seduce him into having sex with her, and he runs out of the house and is trying to say, no, God's not okay with this, gotta go. And she grabs him by the cloak, and he ends up running away from her, even though she had his cloak still. So he ends up running out butt naked to get away from this lady, because he would rather face the shame of being naked in front of whoever sees him and get away than still be inside there and suffer the shame of falling into the temptation. And so that's like a bit of both, really. It's like it's not have strength. The way to fight this temptation isn't have strength so that you can fight the temptation. It's have strength so that you can run away before your strength is removed from you and you fall into temptation. I.e., if Joshua had entertained Potiphar's wife a bit longer, maybe she started seducing him and doing some things that she could have done to get his attention even more so, his strength would slowly go lower and lower and lower and lower and lower, and he would be more likely to fall into the temptation. Similarly, if you have a favorite TV show that unfortunately has raunchy sex scenes or whatever it has in it that's causing you to get lower and lower and lower and lower on your ability to run away from sexual temptation, I'm saying position yourself strategically while you are strong. Because because if you're just walking around on a daily, say you're a person that struggles with pornography and you're just walking around on a daily, and you're trying to resist it, and you're at a default, and pornography is like this hill, right? It's a hill that you're having to climb, and you're trying to climb this hill to get away from it, and you fall into different things. You fall into some advertisements on the side of your screen that you might be watching that are intriguing you and making you struggle a little bit with lust, and you entertain it. Or you have a favorite TV show that you're watching that makes you struggle with lust, and you're entertaining it. And more and more you follow this trail of, I'm going to entertain the temptation for the sin that I love, that I am so tempted by. And eventually you fall into the sin. It's like that hill that you initially had starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and before you know it, to resist your biggest temptations are like you may as well be climbing Mount Everest without any oxygen or any gear. You're just going to freeze and die. You're not going to climb Mount Everest, or it's incredibly unlikely that you're going to do it. So much so that the Bible explicitly has different advice for you than for other sins. It's not, put on the breastplate of righteousness and the shield of faith so that you can withstand the fiery darts of the enemy. It's run away. It's run away. It's strategically place yourself in a place where you're not entering into the temptation. It's like people often talk about temptation not being sin, and it's true, I don't think it's sin. But I think that entering into temptation could be sin. If you are knowingly and willfully saying, I'm going to flirt with this temptation a little bit and see how far I get before I need to just say no, let me run away, you're sinning. I think you and me are both guilty of sinning in that circumstance. Jeez, I'm talking too much. Well, not too much. I'm just talking so much, and this Bible study over this chapter is going to be forever. Let's see. Divorce. This is another huge one. It was also said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of sexual immorality, makes her commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Now, you can interpret this different ways, and there's definitely a lot of people who take an extreme amount of leeway and wiggle room when they interpret this. I'll give you my interpretation of it. So Jesus sets the ground rules. If you're going to divorce your wife, give her a certificate of divorce. This is what the law says. This is what you've all been raised to believe. But Jesus, again, he's going past what the law says. He's taking your service to God more deep than what the law says, and makes it more and more a matter about your heart, your indwelling heart, and your level of not just doing an action, but having intent behind your action. Jesus says, "But I say to you that everyone," oh, I'm sorry, I'll be careful about the mic, "but everyone who divorces his wife makes her commit adultery." And I would flip this too. Everyone who divorces their husband makes him commit adultery, which is intense, right? That's an intense responsibility to be laid, or sin to be laid on you in divorcing someone, to cause them to commit adultery. So that's really serious in and of its own self. And then I bring in the exception, except on the ground of sexual immorality. Now, some versions talk about this as fornication, and other versions say sexual immorality. From what I looked up, when I looked this up, I was hoping that it would be something more along the lines of adultery or fornication or some bigger sexual sin. But unfortunately, what I found is that the word for sexual immorality means just that. It doesn't mean fornication necessarily. It means sexual immorality. So that could be big or that could be small. So what my interpretation, based on what this verse, or based on what this Greek word means, is that it could be something as simple as, like Jesus just previously mentioned, having lustful intent for another woman. It could be something as simple as that. And that's harsh, because now, in seeing that, now the reality of the verse is somebody can divorce their spouse because they lusted after another person, which is probably going to make a lot of you just go like really wide-eyed and be like, oh my gosh, that's ridiculous. I think there's context. And I think the context is, if you are going to divorce your spouse for sexual immorality, that sexual immorality better be much worse, or at very least worse, than what you yourself have done and what you yourself are guilty of. I.e., they went and actually committed adultery while you only struggled with lust for other people. I think that would be a reasonable segmented justification towards divorcing someone. But that's also neither here nor there. That's my personal reasoning, and Jesus left it vague, I think intentionally, so that it would be an issue of each of our individual hearts and each of our individual conscience playing on our mind. So it's like, if you are sitting there and you used to be a really bad person in terms of relationships, and you cheated on people and stuff, and then your spouse cheats on you, are you really going to feel comfortable divorcing them? If your spouse cheats on you and then you cheat on them and you divorce them, are you going to feel comfortable doing that? I don't think God's going to honor that divorce. I love that Jesus makes it so much more difficult for what people were easily doing, just writing a divorce, and so it's like marriage wasn't that committal. It's, yeah, you can get divorced and it's fine. And today's world of marriage is so difficult in its current state that the thought of getting married for so many, myself included, was hard to want to commit to that, because of the marital rate being like 50%, that it will last. And so deep dive into the qualities that make it last is super, super important. And you can't go into too much detail on that, because the video is going to take forever. I'm already overdoing what I was going to do, and I'm going to stop it there. So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it so much. Please like and subscribe on this video if you're enjoying the content. And please, by all means, comment and ask me to do individual videos if there's any topic that you want to hear me ramble on about, and try and give as much value as I can.